a machine discovered something about a person, exploited that discovery, and because it was designed to deliver information, whether it was safe or true, it was irrelevant. It was just designed to deliver information that kept that person emotionally and psychologically engaged, and was so efficient, it drove that person to the only logical conclusion, which was to take her own life.
Yeah.
Symbolically, that's what's happening to democracy. That's what's happening to society.
Thank you for joining me, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Watched your film. It was brilliant. It was brilliant feels like a strange word. It was very upsetting. How did you get into this particular film?
So I was involved in the Cambridge Analytica story with The Guardian, and was digging into ways you can sort of bring the big tech power story to life. Met an author called Shoshana Zuboff, who wrote this book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which was a kind of seminal history of the economic logic behind Silicon Valley.
Right.
So through her and the whistleblower in the Cambridge Analytica case, I was kind of primed and educated by them, and then came across a small article about Molly Russell about a year and a half before the inquest into her death, and sort of met that story and realised like it wasn't, what happened to Molly wasn't like a glitch in the system. It was actually like the system playing out as it was designed to. And then that led to, I reached out to the lawyers of Molly's family, asked if it would be possible to make a film, and then spent about a year not filming anything with Molly's dad. And then we sat through the inquest into her death. And about 2 or 3 months after the inquest, we sort of all agreed to sort of move forward and start a film.
Right. So that was this before the Molly Rose Foundation was created?
I actually don't know when that was created.
No.
Yeah, don't know.
Yeah. So did you...
I think that was probably created. That was nothing to do with us. I don't know when that was created.
So, okay, so I want to back up a little bit and get a bit more detail in that, because your previous films center around, I guess, social issues and justice within America. How did you start making these films in the first place? What drew your interest to these topics?
So a couple of us finished university in 1999. And we...
Sort of squinting as you say
that.
Yeah,
it feels like a long time ago. And we bought some very cheap, off the back of a lorry, digital cameras, and just started making insanely low budget late night Channel 4 documentaries. I think the budget was like £1,000 for an hour's film or something.
So what sort of stuff was that? What were you making?
The first one was on the Burning Man festival back in 99, 2000.
Was that when it was still good, before it was all corporate?
Yeah, it was on the cusp of... I think the name of the film is Community or Chaos. I think they were in between Chaos and then moving into Community, and then it became corporate. And we also did one about a guy who was protesting for the right to be naked in public, non-sexually.
This was in America as well?
No, that was here.
Okay.
And then...
Why?
I can't remember why.
Okay. Makes me think of, there was that famous book where there was two men who walked, John O'Groats to Land's End entirely naked.
Right.
I don't know if that was related or...
I do not know that. I'm sure he
it was
ago. Inspired by it, or they were inspired by him. And then we worked with a couple of music festivals. There was something called The Big Chill back then.
Right.
And we started using all of our material, all of the rushes, to do visuals for different DJs and bands.
Sure.
And we were sort of heavily involved back then in something called indie media, which was sort of before YouTube. Sort of citizen journalism at protests against things like the IMF and the World Bank, and so we're part of what was back then called the anti-globalization movement, which we ended up doing a film about for the BBC, and then we kind of gave up on TV for a bit and just did visuals for bands for a few years, and went around the world on tour and sort of creatively directed different people's.
Sounds a lot nicer than a really serious documentary about the IMF. And
Yeah, I mean, it was, we were kind of, in hindsight, we were kind of squatting people's stages and putting on like agitprop visuals when I look back at that time,
which
which
are
was
really
cool.
popular now as well. The
Yeah.
visual thing is kind
Yeah.
of taking over the music industry.
Yeah, so we were sort of, I guess, also at that point it was all like the digital was just beginning, so it was like a confluence of all different things back then. Anyway, and then I decided to have a break from all that, and the guy I work with still does all that kind of stuff, and I just started looking into feature-length documentaries,
Right.
and we launched this website that asked people to send in stories of resistance against economics and walls between countries and all different types, just general resistance around the world to this economic model. And one of the stories that came in led to the first feature-length film, which was about the death of a migrant in the desert of Arizona.
Yeah. So what was that like, going out there and tracking? I went when I was a kid. So I'm from Arizona. I've lived here for quite a long time, hence the accent. And I remember going to the border wall before it was as controversial as it is now. And we went to, if I remember right, I don't remember the name of the town. It's right on the border of Arizona with Mexico. And we actually went south of the border to a tiny little food hut, basically, where people who had just been kicked back into Mexico, we were sort of supporting them and giving them meals. And for the ones that we could chat with, because I didn't speak any Spanish, but some spoke a little bit of broken English, and I went with kids who spoke a little bit of Spanish, and we just got to chat to them and figure out what it was like to have been a part of this journey. And some people it was like their 7th or 8th time trying to cross and getting kicked back, and it's sort of progressed and escalated now. But what was that like, being there and sort of documenting that journey?
Well, in hindsight, it was just a crazy experience. I shot it all on my own.
You didn't have a crew with you? No one else? Wow.
There was a certain section, a 2-week shoot with an actor who we did have a crew, but we still shot ourselves. But all the documentary stuff I pretty much did solo.
Did you get a lot of weird looks from security or police or anything like that?
Not. I was so sort of ninja and one-man band that I just sort of said I was filming sunrises and sunsets, and didn't really get into the politics of it. And that, again, that was at a point where the DSLR cameras had just come out, so it was like you could shoot cinematic on a camera that looked like you were taking photos, which was again not. I mean, everyone does that now, but back then that was like unheard of.
Revolutionary, yeah.
So I really didn't need that much, just time and a bit of money just to sit with. I got access to the search and rescue teams in Tucson in Arizona. So anytime I would just sit in my hotel, which was like the height of summer at like 100 degrees, and wait for a phone call. And when they called to say they were going out to recover a body or skeletal remains, I would just jump in my car and race down to their place, and then jump in their jeeps, and we'd go out into the desert. And then I also had access to like these, basically there were like 3 main beats, which was the rescue people, the morgue, and then the Mexican consulate, who had to basically, like, between those 3 institutions, they worked out, hopefully, who the person was that had died and where they were from and how to get them home.
And yet, for people who don't know what we're talking about, the film's called Who is Diani Crystal? Is that right? So this person who died supposedly trying to cross into America had a tattoo that said Diani Crystal, and your film documented trying to relate this back to their family. So is it a thing in Mexico? I imagine it's so much worse today, whatever happened then. Do they bother trying to find out who everyone is, or are there so many people crossing that they just don't even...
I only know this sector or this section of the border, and that particular morgue made a huge effort to try and find out who those people were. I don't know what happens now, and I don't know if the numbers are higher or lower. I know, like back then, the system was designed to funnel people through the desert as I think it was called a sort of policy of deterrence, where the belief was the harder it is to cross the border, the less people will attempt it.
Right.
Which really was misguided, because most of those people crossing didn't
They didn't
feel
know
a
it was
threat by
harder or not.
I mean, I think they knew it would be hard, but it didn't deter them from trying it, because what they were coming from or what they were going to was more of an incentive than the disincentive of the danger. And I think they still like replicate those policies, across Europe now, with people dying in the Mediterranean or the Channel.
Well, yeah, you see the routes that people take from different African countries to get to France or Britain, and it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I sort of think of it, the best analogy I can think of is I used to house sit this bird, right? And people always talk about a bird cage. And they go, oh, the bird's got a really big cage. And it's like, well, the bird doesn't know it's got a big cage. It's just in a cage. And I imagine, there's all these deterrence policies within the EU, within America, to make the crossing more difficult. And unless people have done it before and they kind of know what they're getting into, they just know it's going to be difficult. They don't go, oh, well, because of French policies, it's going to be 20% more difficult than it used to be, for example. People are just going to do it because they're running away from loads of horrible things in their own country.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I remember we got this body back to this village in Honduras, and a couple of days after the funeral, this guy's friends, the guy who had died, all his friends were planning a trip back into America, despite knowing that their friend, they'd literally just buried their friend. So that kind of drove home the uselessness of a policy of deterrence.
So then after that, your next film, I can't remember the name. It was it 10 bullets, 3.5 minutes?
3.5 minutes, 10 bullets.
Yeah. So how did you get to Florida
then? So after Who is Diani Crystal, which we were very lucky premiered at Sundance. Someone in the audience got wind of this story in Florida and just reached out to see if I'd be interested in it. And they were happy to put a bit of development money into it. So that story was, at that time, when we first started looking into it, there had been shooting of an African American teenager, where the person who did the shooting claimed it was an act of self-defense, when all the rest of the witnesses had just said that there was some loud music being played. And that was the beginning, the seed of that story. So to begin with, we just reached out to his family. His name is Jordan. So we reached out to Jordan's parents, and we went to meet them, I think, for about a week, just to get a lay of the land and understand, like, from their perspective, what had happened. And then eventually we got permission from the judge in a town called Jacksonville in northern Florida, to film the trial. And once we had all that established, we could then raise money to actually make a film.
So when you're speaking to Jordan's parents or Molly's parents, what is the process like when you have this idea to create a documentary around it? And obviously people are grieving. I imagine it's quite a mixed bag because they want this story to be told and you're giving them an opportunity for more people to know what happened and potentially the truth of what happened. In Jordan's case, it was people weren't quite sure whether it was his fault or his friend's fault, and that's kind of the main story as far as I'm aware was being told. Was the name of the shooter?
Michael Dunn.
Michael Dunn, yeah, because his story was self-defense and he thought he'd seen a gun, and it must be quite a complicated thing for a parent who's grieving to make the decision to be like, right, okay, we've been grieving for a couple of months, bring as many cameras as you can in and just film every aspect of our lives so you can tell this story.
Yeah, so in Jordan's parents are called Ron and Lucy. In their case, so we don't bring loads of cameras in. We just bring me in.
Yeah, just you. One man show.
Yeah, and sometimes someone else, one of the producers, came along sometimes as a kind of just to manage everything that wasn't technical.
Sure.
Relationships. And we are super small and largely invisible. I'm really sensitive, and I'm not looking to sort of get up in anyone's face if they don't want it. So yeah, I think there's a kind of solidarity that you sort of establish collaboratively with the people you're filming. That they know that there's a story that needs to be told that goes beyond what like mainstream media are able to do in a short space of time, and they also sort of recognize and understand that what happened to their child was obviously hugely individual, but simultaneously represented something that was really wrong, like systemically. And in that case, it was there's a law, at least at that time, I think it was in half the states of the US, which was called Stand Your Ground.
Yeah.
Which
how recently before, sorry to cut you off, but how recently before this was the Trayvon Martin case? Because I know that was sort of circulating at the same time as this.
So I think when we reached out, the Trayvon Martin verdict hadn't happened.
Okay.
But that case was
in the news.
Yeah, it was in the news, and this was the sort of I mean, in inverted commas, like the second well publicized Stand Your Ground trial. And so yeah, not only were his parents aware that stories needed to be told about the nuance of Stand Your Ground, but also obviously like huge systemic racism in the US, and this kind of very subconscious bias, well, conscious and subconscious bias of what do people feel when they see a African American male teenager in a hoodie playing loud rap music. What does that trigger in people? And I think the film ended up forcing people to question, their own biases and what they would have done in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's such a difficult thing in a country like America because I would almost divide it into two things. You've got the systemic racism side of it, which might be how the courts see the case, but I wouldn't call the shooting itself systemic racism. I would almost call that a systemic internal bias on behalf of a specific demographic in America, that white people might be scared of black people. You hear the classic story of a black man crossing the street and someone locks their car doors. I feel like there's multiple things going on, and that's sort of escalated over the years. So when you...
I think that's would probably be defined as racist. That bias is a racist bias. But however it's been constructed, the outcome is that it's basically racism.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So when this film comes out and people see it across the US and different countries, do you, and I imagine you give talks after shows and things like that, when you speak with people, do you practically see people's minds changing around that sort of a thing, or people realizing that they need to change their minds around that sort of a thing?
Yeah, the conversations and the Q&As and the press and that we have afterwards. I think in both those cases, the Here is the Arnie Cristal and 3.5 minutes, 10 bullets. Both of them provoked people to sort of question their assumptions and biases, and I think made people look beyond the stereotypes of in one case migrants and in another case black teenagers. Yeah, and I guess all of that is in a belief that stories and culture shift perception, which in turn, hopefully, when there's enough of them, shifts like policy.
It's an interesting one because these films came out a few years ago, and I always say whatever's happening in America seems to happen in Britain about 5 to 10 years later. It feels like now there's a polarization around kind of the exact same topics of your first two films. There's all this immigration debate, and that's kind of centering politics in this country right now. Like Labour and Tories don't really exist anymore because now it's all about immigration versus not immigration, and violence and grooming gangs and who is escalating certain types of violence. And it's sadly slowly made its way over here because having grown up in America, you see that. And I go back and I visit my family, say at Christmas time, and when you watch the news, it feels like you're in a Star Wars film because there's the good side and the dark side. And it really feels like politics is getting to that point where people can't meet in the middle anymore, particularly politicians, and so that just spreads down, and there's nobody sort of talking about a neutral stance anymore. I want to sort of move on because I'm fascinated to hear about you talked a bit about the Cambridge Analytica scandal. For people who don't know, this was around Brexit, and this was Dominic Cummings, and this was using I think it was primarily Facebook still at the time, but generally social media to bias people's opinion towards a Brexit vote. So
yeah, and a Trump vote,
and a Trump vote. Yeah, of course. I forget that was involved as well. So how were you involved in this then? You said you were writing articles about it. I feel like it, or no?
No, go on. No, I wasn't writing articles, but go on. Go.
Okay, well, okay. I'm curious how you were involved. But I feel like it was one of those stories that it was quite explosive when it came out because nobody knew about it for the longest time, and it was the first time that anything had ever really been done like this. Cambridge Analytica. I can't remember. There was a documentary. It might have been The Social Dilemma, where they had proven before they came to the UK that they'd successfully used social media in, I'm going to use the word smaller countries' elections to rig them in their favour, whichever that may have been. And so by the time it got to America in Donald Trump's first campaign and the Brexit campaign, they'd sort of had a good track record by that point, so they could sort of weaponize this against the people to get the outcome that they wanted. So I'm circling back. How were you involved in this in the first place?
So a producer knew the lead investigative journalist at The Guardian, Carol Cadwalladr.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah. And I was just asked, this was I can't remember, 2 or 3 months before the story broke. She'd been researching it for like a year or two. So I very much came in at the end and was asked if we could do some sort of film, in parallel to when the story broke. So I was just asked to meet the whistleblower, whose name was Chris Wiley. And I went to this meeting at about, I think it was like a 5-6 p.m. It was just in an empty office in Soho. And I left there about 6 hours later after the most extraordinary conversation I've ever had. And I remember I was so discombobulated by his perception and like vision of the world and the future and the power that this way of manipulating data had. I remember like not even being able to cycle home that night. I had to push my bike home because it was just like, oh, I'm going to fall off. I'm going to kill myself if I'm so not able to concentrate on cycling. And that really shifted. It's very rare. I mean, it happens once in a while. But that was one of the moments where like that conversation literally just like cranked my brain and made me see the world in a different way. Yeah.
What is it like to come into that months before it comes out?
Amazing. It's an absolute privilege.
Do you not want to tell everyone you know instantly?
Yeah, I mean, you got
to
keep
like,
quiet. Yeah. You got to keep quiet on it.
Big secret.
Yeah, not discuss it on the phone and emails and all that. But no, it's amazing. It happens rarely, and when it happens, it's a real it's a total privilege to be involved in something like that. And yeah, we did this like aesthetically interesting, cool interview with the guy, and that we then did. I think we did a sort of extended short, like a 30-minute short that we also released. That came out at the time that story broke, and I carried on learning from Chris for many years afterwards. We would meet and discuss, how the whole like data space was evolving and what it meant in terms of power and politics, and visually, how do you represent this sort of invisible superpower that's being imposed upon the world that all of us know we are in a relationship with, but nobody can see or touch or seemingly do anything about. And those conversations, many hours, like we would have 4-hour dinners for every other week for years. That really it was again like a total privilege to be able to be in conversation with someone who like understood the world in that way.
I remember the name Chris Wiley. I don't remember his involvement in it. What were you learning from him after the fact? Was he involved in like the programming of this software, or what specifically?
Well,
did he
worked at Cambridge Analytica.
Right. He was one of the main guys that Dominic Cummings was speaking to.
There was a small team of them, and he was one of the people in that team. And it wasn't just Dominic Cummings; it was Steve Bannon, a hedge fund guy who had started to understand the power of algorithms. Mercer, can't remember his first name.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, there was a bunch of them.
I remember why I remember this story now is because they came out with that, I don't remember what it's called, but Benedict Cumberbatch played Dominic Cummings and they portrayed this story.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got really upset because they knew about the story, but they thought that they were sort of, Benedict Cumberbatch had just played Sherlock, so they thought they were showing him in a sort of genius light. And I was like, well, you have to admit,
wow,
whether you like it or not, it was a very genius move to secretly sneak this under the radar and play it however you want to play it, but it was a good way of telling the story. Yeah. So you sort of became more aware of this invisible infrastructure at play. How did you first hear about Molly? Was it Molly Rose Russell? Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd been educated by Chris. I also had reached out to this author, Shoshana Zuboff, and said that I was just starting to get into. We'd just done Cambridge Analytica. We'd just done 3.5 Minutes, 10 Bullets. So I shared all those films with her, and at that point her book had not been released, so I read like a pre-publication copy of the book, and then realised that what she was outlining in that book was the whole sort of systemic underpinnings of this power, of this new power, and then it kind of allowed me to understand how the Cambridge Analytica event was just sort of one manifestation of something even bigger. So yeah, I sat with that for I think maybe 2 years, and again, hugely privileged position to be. Now I was being educated by like one of the leading thinkers on like Silicon Valley systems, but I couldn't work out. It's a huge book of like 500 pages, and I couldn't work out at that time how to translate that into a story that was sort of driven by a human character rather than it be like a bunch of talking heads and archive
facts and figures.
Yeah, which super cool for other people to make those types of films. Not really like what I get off on. So so I was very fortunate. I had a bit of development money to just basically sit in this space and wallow in it for a while.
It's always helpful as a creative.
It's wonderful. Like that's the best thing I can get is basically money to develop ideas. And I was also at the time I had this thing called an embedded fellowship within Amnesty's tech department,
right,
which was funded by a foundation in America, the Ford Foundation. And so simultaneously they were struggling, or they were interested in, again, like this is before anyone knew any of this stuff, like in a mainstream way.
So how did you, because I did see I think an interview online where you were with, I can't remember the name of the woman who's part of Amnesty International.
Oh, yeah.
How did you become involved with them? Was it because they knew that you were researching this stuff, or?
Yeah, I'd done, we'd done a couple of films for them around the time of the Who is Gianni Cristal about migration into the US. And we'd won I think an Amnesty award or something for that.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. So I had a relationship with them, and through a mutual friend, we just ended up going out for a drink with that team, and they were just starting to express, come and do a short film about this tech thing. And what we all realized really quickly was like, nobody even knew what the film should be about.
Was this around the time of the Facebook Supreme Court case, or was this before?
This would have been around 2017, 18.
Okay.
And at that time, the conversation at that time was, again, like, how do you tell stories about something that is seemingly invisible? That was like the challenge. So yeah, we managed to get some funding for me to basically just sit in their space and try and work out how, like, what would you even make a short film about? And then I think COVID hit, so that all just sort of evolved weirdly. And then by that point, basically these like three trajectories of Chris and Shoshana and Amnesty were all sort of swirling around and feedback looping everywhere. And then I came across this story of someone I obviously knew nothing about, called Molly Russell. And it was just a very small article about a girl from North London who had taken her own life, seemingly because of material she'd watched on Instagram. And that was like an epic sort of light bulb moment for me, where these three trajectories suddenly sort of manifested through this human story. And then, that journey began.
Yeah. And your film didn't touch on it, but it's because it wasn't a part of it. But I watched it with my partner about a week ago, and she was talking about when she was growing up, because she's a couple of years older than I am. She was on Tumblr back in the day before it had all its restrictions, and she used to see a lot of the same stuff. She hadn't seen it in a while, so it sort of brought those memories back for her, that's what Tumblr used to be. That was what her feed was.
Yeah, many people have said that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know. I don't know what percentage it is of people in general, I think that's the main argument from Meta, right? Is it's such a small percentage of what you actually see. But the problem is, for a lot of people, a small percentage of the world is still a very large percentage of people, and a very large percentage of people are still seeing this incredibly harmful content. Yeah, and it wasn't really, I don't remember what year Mark Zuckerberg standing up in the Supreme Court and turning around and saying he's sorry. It took as far as that for things to kind of begin changing, but it's still a massive problem today. And ever since Molly's story, which was quite a few years ago now, I've been doing a bit of research for our chat today and what's sort of going on today. And there's the famous one was from a few years ago, ElsaGate, if you remember that. ElsaGate was when YouTube created their YouTube Kids channel, right? So you'd create an account and you could only see kids content. And it was a lot of sort of cheap animation. You'd get a lot of like off-brand Spider-Man or Disney characters doing things. And someone figured out at one point in time that if you used that to your advantage, you could slip in horrible content. So you'd get Elsa cutting her wrists in the bath, or you name the Disney princess taking her clothes off, and it being quite a sexual scene. And so people thought it was quite funny to slip in quite harmful or sexual content to children. And it was called ElsaGate because Elsa from Frozen was one of the first characters they used, and it was these happy little characters doing horrible things, and kids didn't know, because you're watching the YouTube algorithm and it's recommending one video after another, and you're watching some kid's TV show, and then this one comes on, and a 5-year-old kid doesn't know the difference. They're just being pushed endless things, because what YouTube is trying to do is get kids hooked early, right? So by the time they grow up, they're just hooked on it. I don't really know what the intention was, other than trolling and just harming kids for the sake of it, which seems to be a big thing nowadays. There's another thing I learned. There's a story that came out about 6 months ago about, it's called The Com. And it is an online community. And this feels like a sort of development of, people talk about Roblox and people going on to get kids to do things on Roblox and things like that. But The Com, I don't really understand if it's a forum or a community or a blog or a website. The best example I can give is there was that Black Mirror episode that came out a few years ago with Alex Lothar, and he's masturbating at the start, if you've seen this one, and they capture his picture and they go, unless you do exactly what we want you to, we're going to send this out to your family and friends and school and ruin your life. And eventually, I don't even remember what happens, but it exaggerates to such a point at the end of the film episode. And The Com is essentially this, which is happening right now. So kids would go on, send a picture to someone they might think is a woman, but they're being catfished online, and they go, unless you do all this stuff. And it's really horrible stuff what they're making kids do. They're making them like smash cars and light things on fire and self-harm, and send pictures of everything they're doing and send videos. And if they don't do this, they threaten to ruin their lives by sending out naked pictures of them to... So it's really, really escalating. Like in just the space of a few years, it's gotten really bad. And I don't really know. I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit about what's happening in the UK now with this social media ban for under 16s. I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't actually think it's going to solve what they want it to solve. Because you've got a lot of people in the House of Lords, which are 132 and don't understand how technology works, and they go, oh, of course social media is bad, and they hear all these lobbyists and probably people like the Molly Rose Foundation talk about kids harming or killing themselves, but I don't know if it's going to solve the problem. I know Australia's done it. From what I'm hearing, kids understand how to use a VPN nowadays. Kids, from what I understand, slapping on a fake mustache to get past a picture verification. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on, are we going in the right direction with this? Is this actually going to stop, or is there a better way that has not yet been proposed in Parliament to solve this problem and help kids?
Okay, that's an epic question.
Yeah.
I'll just share my experiences since the film's come out of conversations that we've had on this theme with all different types of people, from parents at little screenings in schools, through to we recently were in Barcelona with the digital minister of Spain who hosted a screening. So like a really wide spectrum of society and culture.
Yeah.
So the kind of things I've learned along the way are, I think it's really unhelpful to use the word ban. And I would personally prefer to be using the word delay, because we don't say that we're banning kids from having sex or alcohol or learning to drive. We just, as a culture and society, decide this is the best time, this is the best age, and we're going to legislate around those ages. So I think ban is like way too provocative and doesn't help anybody. I think when we hear about Australia, personally, I think it's way too early to tell if that's been successful or not, despite all the studies that say exactly what you said, kids can bypass it and all the rest of it. Because I also think that when we're talking about this, it's not necessarily about the generation who are currently already on it and have now been told to get off it. I think it's about the next generation, who haven't yet interacted with it, and that being delayed until an appropriate age. So let's just say, for argument's sake, 16. So that those two things I think are really significant and not talked about enough. Then I also understand that it's a hugely complex thing. And there is this horrible fine line between like safety and privacy. And so far, in all the people that I've heard talk about it, there are not enough people trying to work out how do we have safety and privacy simultaneously. And that means that the kind of space is quite sort of divisive. You're either pro kids' rights to use social media / let's not invade their privacy by asking their age.
And everyone else's.
And
because
everyone
as
else's.
soon as you go, you have to be over 16. Every single person has got to. Yeah.
And I think also there's another nuance in there, which is seemingly we're okay to have our privacy invaded by social media companies and any digital company, pretty much, where everything they know about us, they can pretty much estimate our age anyway. And yet, when it comes to governments, we have like a much more we're much more anti a government knowing our age than these corporations. And I personally think that these corporations are as, if not more, powerful because of the amount of information they have on us than governments do anyway. I understand governments have a different type of power and can abuse that, etc., etc. But that's a nuance that I find interesting, that people are willing to give up their privacy to these companies, but not to a government. Anyway, all of that sits downstream of what the main problem is anyway. And yes, all the things you just said are not going to be the ultimate solution to this problem, because unless we're really talking about the business models and the invasion of privacy in the first place. So, for example, I always wondered whilst we were making the film about Molly, how was the machine aware? How did the machine receive signals that she was interested in depression and self-harm in the first place? And the reason that machine knows that is because it's able to extract that data from her and then sort of make a judgment call, in inverted commas, as to what she's interested in or not interested in. And that goes back to this author, Shoshana Zuboff, who basically is like, look, the original sin is the extraction of this data in the first place. And through her, I came to sort of understand all of us are like little coal mines of data.
Little modules of...
And we are extracted from continuously and simultaneously fed back stuff that is subtly and not so subtly shifting our behavior. So really, if you want to stop kids or frankly adults having their behavior modified by these companies and these systems, you have to really shut down like the supply chain, the extraction of the data in the first place. And if you're not dealing with that at a policy level, then yes, you're going to have many problems downstream of that, and child safety is one of them.
That's such a big task.
Yeah.
Because everything is extracting our data all the time.
Yeah, and Shoshana's argument is there's a new form of economics, a new form of capitalism called surveillance capitalism, where every single, not every single, the huge majority of companies now are extracting data for profit.
It's the thing of, if you don't understand what the money-making model is, you are the money-making model. Why aren't you getting ads on Facebook? I mean, you probably are, but it's because they're constantly extracting not only what you post, but they're extracting the number of milliseconds that you spend on a certain post. And Siri and Alexa are listening to what you say on a regular basis. And people go, no, it only listens when I say, hey, Siri. But no, it's listening to what you say all the time because it's waiting for you to say, hey, Siri. Or your Roomba is extracting the data of your house so that it can estimate how many towels you have in your bathroom, and maybe you don't have enough, so it can post them to you in Facebook adverts. And people
now all of that model is underpinning chatbots.
Right, of course, yeah. It's going to be so much worse in the age of AI.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about your film, I thought it was really cleverly done. I really liked the idea of the machine sort of extracting, and it was Molly's bedroom, and I was just fascinated how you sort of graphically did that anyway, and Molly sort of moving around the space, and I really liked the recreation of the court case. One, because it was brilliant. Two, because it went, oh, we got some actors, and one of those actors is Neil Maskell, who is not, it's just, usually it's like, we got some actors and you get some extras, and I'm like, that's a really good, I watched a lot of his films because he was brilliant. So I thought that was really exciting. But in the recreation of the trial, I can't remember the name of the woman who represented Meta.
Yeah, Elizabeth Lagone.
And her analogy was that if kids who were already feeling depressed, for lack of a better word, were seeing this content and or posting it, it would be wrong and harmful of Meta to remove certain types of content because it would make them feel more alone. I don't know if that's true. It feels wrong. It feels like if there was no harmful content, kids would not be harming themselves. I'm curious what your thoughts and wisdom are on that.
I remember that in real life, and then obviously when we were shooting the reconstruction. So I think the counter argument to that is, sure, if someone is expressing through liking or posting images of self-harm as a cry for help, that's a legitimate cry for help. But the response to that maybe should be an alternative response to what Meta were doing. Might be that A, the system doesn't push you any further down that rabbit hole. B, it activates some sort of like warning signal to teachers or parents, or tells you to go and speak to a human instead of carrying on interacting with an algorithm. And so it's not that the warning sign itself is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's what Meta do with that warning sign. And for them, they don't do anything other than push that person further down that rabbit hole. And the other thing, I remember speaking with Molly's friends about this, and they were like, there is a difference between an algorithmically curated community of people who similarly like self-harm content from how they expressed it, from us, her real friends, who are her real community, who didn't know about any of this. And I think that is the frustrating point about Elizabeth Lagone / Meta's perspective, to the point where I don't, towards the end of the film, these papers are released because there was a court case in America which meant that some internal papers had to be submitted and then were in the public domain. And in those court papers, people very, very high up at Meta expressed that this was not a convincing argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
They knew internally it was a very, very bad argument. Yeah.
Elizabeth was misrepresenting Meta's position because you're right. It would be one thing to allow people to post that, but it's a very different thing to then push algorithmic content onto them.
Yeah, and even allow them to post it, let's just say, within their like friends and family, right? Like you could, versus allowing them to post it to anybody else on the internet. Within Instagram in that case. It's a huge difference.
And that differs quite strongly to Molly's case as well, because her friends, nobody knew that this was going on because she wasn't posting. She was just receiving. So how does that work then? You look for a post like that, you like it, and then like everything else. If you're a fan of football, Instagram's going to send you content based on that.
Yeah, because the system is designed, the word that they used was agnostic. It's designed to be agnostic, as in it's not trained to understand the difference between self-harm content and football content. It's only designed to recognize things that you spend more time looking at, whether that's a millisecond or 10 minutes. It doesn't matter about the length of time. It just knows that you're more interested in A than you are in B, and therefore it's going to send you down the A rabbit hole. And also these systems, in inverted commas, understand that you spend more time on content that is more dramatic or more engaging or more violent or more whatever.
Sure.
Which again, like, just accentuates that journey into something more extreme. So I mean, like, we got told hundreds of examples of people who, for example, there was a girl, someone was telling me about her daughter who likes horse riding videos or whatever, and then the most extreme version of horse riding videos turns out to be horses that are being like beaten by their trainers or something. So this innocent 12-year-old girl or 13-year-old who likes horses was suddenly being served content of like abuse to horses. And then another story about an equivalent teenage boy who likes cars, within a couple of days was being served up videos, real life videos from CCTV cameras of car crashes. And people being run over because that's the most extreme version of being interested in cars.
Yeah. Sort of it's like the gateway drug thing, is someone else has gone down that rabbit hole of watching the most extreme content. And so that's what the algorithm goes, oh, you like cars, you'll like the most extreme version, because then we can keep you on Instagram for 10 minutes instead of 5 minutes. And
yeah. So the whole system's built on is essentially like engagement, and not built on safety.
I would sort of hope that this is one of the places where AI might actually help, because I think one of the biggest defenses on behalf of social media companies that I've heard over the last few years regarding this sort of a thing is that it's too difficult to flag every single thing, so they try as best as they can. But I would hope with AI moderation, and the other problem with this is the back to the censorship thing. So one of the biggest industries in the world right now is being a company that moderates social media content. And it's a big problem because did you ever hear of the Twitter files in America? It was the last election. It was how intelligence agencies were working hand in hand with X and Instagram to censor people who were critical of COVID, and saying things that they didn't necessarily like, and they would shadow ban them and do all these things. And they got caught for that. And there was a big Supreme Court case about it. And they found out that that was completely illegal. And they'd not only been doing it in America, they'd been doing it all over the place, sort of stopping people's freedom of speech. But one of the ways that they're sneaking that in now is people who were formerly in intelligence agencies are now creating companies that regulate content, harmful supposed content. right, for people under a certain age or demographic, because it's too difficult and it's too time-consuming and expensive for Facebook to create their own sector to do this. And if they haven't understood how to do it up until now, even after that Supreme Court case, they're not going to do it. They're going to pay another company. And so what happens is you get companies that are paid to regulate content. But the problem is this is another way for intelligence agencies to sneak in censorship. And then you get into that whole thing again of what is privacy versus what is protection. I can't remember the word you used, safety. And it's a really difficult discussion because there was the digital ID thing that happened a couple of months ago, and loads of people were up in arms about that because they were like, this is a way to sneak in censorship and sort of Orwellian surveillance, and that's a whole other issue. But I'm curious, one of the biggest arguments that social media companies make is that parents should be held responsible, which I don't think is the case. I think in many places, including this one, there needs to be a bigger education, as well as you say, maybe the ban is going to work, maybe it's not going to work. Obviously, ban is the wrong term. When you're traveling to all these different countries and showing the film and speaking to policymakers from different places, what are people's thoughts on this, whether it should be a ban or education or somewhere in the middle? Sorry for the long
No,
question.
it's great. It's you're right. Like all of those things are at play. I think the other thing I find myself in conversations about on that is why are we talking about banning the victims, the kids, and not talking about banning the perpetrators, which are these companies?
Yeah.
And I don't, you could make it as simple as this. Your product is proven to be not safe. There are loads of other products in the world that have been proved not to be safe, and they're taken out of the market and they're fixed. And then someone decides, yes, cool, that's passed the safety test. And now you can come back into the market. Because of big tech's power and lobbying and et cetera, we have not yet dealt with them in that way. Again, that kind of decision sits upstream of all the complexity you just described.
Yeah, of course.
So I think we spend a huge amount of time discussing things that are downstream of the solutions. This thing about free speech, I think, works in big tech's favor in a huge way, because you can't be arguing for free speech when the algorithms are completely driving and manipulating your behavior. So I feel like the free speech space,
it's a great angle. Whether it be true or not, it's a grey area, but it's a great angle for them.
It's a very exploitative. It's a very easy narrative to exploit, because people, particularly in the US, are up in arms about free speech, whilst being force-fed really particular forms of information by an algorithm, yet simultaneously arguing that they don't have free speech, that we should be protecting free speech. That is a paradox that I think needs to be hugely educated about. I can't remember what else you asked me. Sorry.
I can't remember what else I asked you either.
Bans. No, there was
I was
other
asking,
stuff.
I guess, about like have you heard any other ideas from policymakers in different countries on different ways to approach this? I think education either way needs to be a part of it, and that doesn't mean the parents are responsible.
Oh yeah, parents, that's it.
Yeah, parents. Yeah.
I think it's really out of order to say that this is on parents. I mean, before I made the film, but also as a result of making the film, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of parents. Everyone knows this anyway. You don't need to make a film to know this. Everyone knows that they're having arguments all the time in every household, in probably every country in the world, about, in inverted commas, screen time. You only have to compare like a photo of a high street from 10 years ago to today to see that we're all walking around with phones, or you get on the tube and everyone's like, we are all completely addicted, be it parents or kids. And again, like, if we're happy with that as a society, that we're addicted to to machines, devices that are completely in control, like literally controlling our own micro versions of reality. Your reality will be different to mine because your algorithm is different to mine.
Yeah.
And the implications of this are, for me, like I think what I'm bridging into next, or is rooted in this experience of this film and Cambridge Analytica, but I think has a long way to go. And I don't think it's been like, I certainly haven't fully expressed it in the Molly film, is this idea which began with Cambridge Analytica, or my experience of Cambridge Analytica, which was, which I learned from Chris Wiley, which was, you can't have a democracy if you do not have a shared sense of reality. And if we are all being fed different things, then our realities are all slightly different. So he gave this analogy of, imagine a politician in a town square, 20 years ago when we were younger, and we went to see this rally, and we heard what the politician had to say. You and I both heard the same words. We went to the pub afterwards and we had a chat about it, and we were both talking about exactly the same thing. If you do that today, the analogy would be, the algorithm like comes out of the politician's mouth and enters your ear, knowing everything about your digital makeup, and will whisper things to you that are there to seduce you. And then it will come to me and whisper something completely different to me because of my algorithmic makeup. And then we'll go to the pub and we won't be discussing the same thing. And we won't find a way of like communicating through the same thing. And that's how things like what I feel is happening now, not just me, many people, that this fragmentation that we all feel that's going on around us is driven by this idea that all of our realities are slightly, if not dramatically, slightly too dramatically, depending on where you are on the spectrum, are different. And I think if we're bridging from sort of the early days of social media to Molly's story to where we are now, which is like we're already there, but on the bridge of this big, in inverted commas, AI moment, AI is going to be able to isolate us as individuals even further and fragment that shared reality even further. And I think that is the problem of our time. And all the other things we're talking about, which are super legitimate, but they sit downstream of that. And that is, I also think it's inevitable that when you have these systems that are built on hyper efficiency and hyper engagement, and essentially like a form of control that isn't control through being beaten over the head by a like police baton, but it's actually control through giving you exactly what you seemingly want. Like control via the like button.
So there's Orwell. I forget the name of the other book.
Huxley. So it's more Huxley, Brave New World vibes,
which is what
than
people
1984.
Talk about. Sorry, I didn't
totally.
cut you off, but
Totally.
That's what it is.
And I think what's going to happen with AI, or what is happening already with AI, but so we grew up on like the like button, which on the surface like we loved using, right? It's great. Oh, I like that band. Or I like, and I'm going to get more of that band. That's great.
When
blah,
Facebook
blah, blah.
was the thing. Yeah,
great. But what now that I like look back over this whole journey, it's like, wow, that like button is like a veneer and underneath I now understand like the system behind that like button. And I think like when we say we need to be educated, it's like, okay, what is the system behind a chatbot, which is basically like the new version of a like button, just much more sophisticated and human, in inverted commas, expresses itself as a human. But essentially, it doesn't matter if it's the like button on the surface or a chatbot on the surface, because underneath, like the system that is behind that veneer is a system that is based on extraction and engagement and separating you from what it might have been Orwell, I can't remember, but basically this thing called consensus reality. And if you don't have that, you cannot have a democracy.
I don't know how we get back to it. So one of the biggest problems with, again, I'm sort of coming at it from as well this freedom of speech side, because that's something I'm slightly worried about. One of the biggest problems, particularly in the UK, that people talk about is that they are going to ban under 16s from using social media, but also they're proposing 16-year-olds can vote in elections. So you go, how do you get your information in order to properly vote in an election? You go to, if you can't use social media, you have to go to news. And we already know news is biased as well, because news is it's a dying art form really compared to social media. Nobody reads it anymore compared to how they used to. You have the head of the BBC, 2 weeks ago, saying that they know they're biased. They're biased in a left progressive way, and they've admitted that mistake. Similarly to, there was I believe she was a Swedish woman who worked for Meta, who was in your film. I assume, I don't know the Swedish accent. It's a Nordic woman.
Yeah, Danish.
Who was the head of sort of censorship at Meta, and admitting that was basically useless. They'd worked on it for 3 years, and she didn't really understand if they'd made any impact at all. So I don't know what we turn to at this point. If news is kind of biased, there's the new ground news, everyone's using it because it shows you sort of a balanced perspective of the news and how different.
I mean, for me, it's not a question of whether news is biased, because you have a choice if you want to read like The Guardian or The Times, right? It's not. And also there's regulation in place around whether you're allowed to report things that are true or not true. I think I just think it's a false argument, and it's driven by this, the whole free speech space. It's about whether something is true or not.
Yeah.
And on, for want of a better term, social media or chatbots, when every single search or retrieval you're triggering in a chatbot environment, if it's coming with a warning from those companies with a disclaimer that says you might be receiving information that's not true, you don't get that when you watch the news. You don't get that in a newspaper, because there are laws in place and regulation in place and a code of conduct in place that doesn't exist in these other environments.
That's yes, but I guess the point I'm getting to is fragmentation and polarization, like you were talking about before. And I don't think that if we just stopped using social media, that we would have less of a problem, because yes, they have to tell the truth and there is regulation around that, but they nonetheless have a spin or an angle to the way they tell the truth. Someone, you might get Nigel Farage is a perfect example. You get newspapers that talk about him like he's the best thing since sliced bread, and people talk about how horrible he is. They nonetheless tell the story of a speech he made, but they'll have a spin on it. So is there any way you see, having, again, showing this film and speaking to people all around the world, is there any way out of not only social media fragmentation, but the fragmentation in every other part of existence, or is that just something we're barreling towards?
I think I don't know how you can stop that, because that is obviously now like the richest companies, most powerful companies on the planet are running that. And no one film is going to stop that, obviously. I think we have to be aware that we are inhabiting like a new environment of which we don't yet fully understand our relationship to information in that environment. So unless you understand when you're in these digital spaces, what is the driving mechanism behind the information you're receiving, you're going to be susceptible to that information, whether it's biased or true or not true or extreme. If you're not, in inverted commas, literate to the power structure behind the delivery of that information, then you are going to be vulnerable as an individual and as a society. And I just don't think it. I don't mean that I don't. Not to not agree with you. I just mean I don't think that these arguments about free speech and in inverted commas old school media or new media. I just think again it's just a complete distraction because it's not going to the heart of what is actually happening, which is we don't care anymore about whether something is true or not, factually correct or not, because the systems don't drive information in that way, like old school media. I agree, of course it's biased, but it wasn't factually incorrect and it wasn't blatantly not real.
Yeah, well now we've got AI slop as well, which is just completely
Yeah, I even think the slop is not
genuine.
even. Yeah, I think the slop is a distraction as well. The language of the word slop, like it's not for me. It's not a question like slop. At least you know it's not real. It's the well, okay, so it's the sophisticated. Yeah, okay, it does. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'll rewind on that. What I mean is that sorry, I'm just going to rewind. So
I understand it's a different.
We're in a moment where our views, opinions, who we're going to vote for, are not driven by facts. They're driven by the relationship between the information we receive, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter, and our emotional response to that information. That's what I feel we need to be literate about. Because if we don't understand the difference between being emotionally, psychologically triggered by machines, which now have known us for many years and know exactly how to trigger us and shift our behavior, in a way that, again, that in inverted commas, mainstream or legacy media or whatever did not have the power to do. Yes, it's got loads of faults, but it did not have the power to manipulate your behavior to the extent that this system does. That's what we need to be literate about. And if we don't do that quickly, which I can't see that many people are, very little about that is happening. We're really going to be in significant trouble.
I mean, we all.
And Molly, sorry, and just to say, Molly's story, whilst being a story obviously about child safety online, is really a story about what we're talking about now, which is a machine discovered something about a person, exploited that discovery, and because it was designed to deliver information, whether it was safe or true, it was irrelevant. It was just designed to deliver information that kept that person emotionally and psychologically engaged, and was so efficient, it drove that person to the only logical conclusion, which was to take her own life. Symbolically, that's what's happening to democracy. That's what's happening to society. That's obviously we're not all pushed necessarily to take our own lives, but the fragmentation from reality, the separation from real friends and family and teachers and all the rest of it, which should have supported her, if they were aware of it, would have supported her in a different way to the algorithm. If she would have said to a teacher, I'm feeling these things, the teacher wouldn't have said, oh, have 2,000 more images of self-harm content, right? That would have been the last thing a teacher would have done, or a parent or a friend. So what Molly's story really, for me, whilst on the surface it's about child safety, it's really like a fable about not being literate to these systems of essentially behavioral modification at scale.
Yeah, like you said, you need to know the reasons why you're receiving the content as well. I was on in researching for this chat, I was on YouTube the other day and I was looking up something along the lines, I searched like social media self-harm court case or something like that, and before it showed me any videos, it came up with an alert. And I'd never seen this before, but it was essentially like a, if you need any help, sort of the Samaritans thing. And I was like, okay, well, that's a step in the right direction. And I think everything should definitely have that. And it seems like up until this point, things like Meta, Facebook, Instagram haven't had that. It's very important. You've got the, I can't remember what it's called, community notes, I think, on X now, where it'll come up with a flag or people can ask Grok, which is built into X, is this true? The funny thing about social media, and you're talking about all this polarization, is you do just literally see that going from one platform to another. X is very left-wing from what I've seen, and X is very right-wing and Instagram is very left-wing. And you'll see the same stories just with a different spin, but you'll see, missiles hitting Iran, and people go, Grok, is this real? And they go, no, this is AI generated content, or this is even real life footage of a different war from 20 years ago that people have now put on for clicks. So is it, in your opinion, is the best way to move forward, rather than just saying ban on behalf of the government, that we need responsibility on behalf of social media companies for particularly education and literacy?
They know about this for 20 years, certainly for 10 years, since they slightly changed the system.
Well, there's all those internal emails of them saying they
they
knew that
have
this was
no
the case.
intention of improving it, because for them, improving it to do anything that you're talking about would mean a decrease in profit.
Yeah.
So they've got no incentive at all to do any of it. And the only institutions that have the power to make any difference is essentially governments, because that's who create laws. And if it's not done through the law, it won't be done.
Yeah.
And all the things, I agree, now if you search for that, you get the warning you just described. And but that's from, not to sound too cynical, but that's like the equivalent of greenwashing. I mean, it should be there, and it's good that it's there. But, again, it's on the surface. It's not actually systemically changing the system underneath.
So they can say, oh, look, we're doing this. Look how good we're doing.
Yeah.
And then you just click through as well.
Yeah.
You just go, I'm fine. And you click through and you see all the videos you want, which is, I imagine, kids aren't even reading that. They just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see any examples in other countries of alternate models to this?
I'm not equipped to answer that, other than all across Europe, and we've done many screenings in the last 6 months. There is a massive conversation happening about we should be designing these systems differently. The Silicon Valley way of building these systems is only one way. It's not inevitable that it has to be driven by, a handful of people from Silicon Valley who have decided that this is their ideology, and they will infuse information networks with that ideology.
Yeah.
That is simply a choice that's been made. And if you wanted to, you could not have that, and you could build these systems with a completely different ideology at their heart, that's not driven by engagement, that doesn't allow for non-truthful information, etc., etc., etc. And again, it's like, that is, I think, there's been now so much experience of, obviously, like, we're doing it through the lens of child safety, but let's just go from child safety to all the way through to democracy. Like, all countries in Europe are highly aware of how the Silicon Valley model has fractured their societies over the last 10 years or whatever. And obviously they're super aware that AI is just going to jet fuel that even further. So yeah, there's a huge conversation happening across Europe about how to essentially like reclaim information networks from Silicon Valley, and America, as is comes across at the end of the film, is highly aware of Europe trying to put some safeguarding in,
Mm.
and again criticizes it on the basis of free speech, which I think is a complete red herring, and is essentially under threat, right? They feel that if Europe do that, it's a threat to America's economic interests. And even this week, the Trump administration warned the UK government, suggested to the UK government that they should not do a social media ban because it would be unfair and too much of a burden on American companies. And I don't know, I can't remember the exact details of it, but, you know, a year ago when all the tariff war stuff was happening,
I know that was a lot to do with
you
it
know,
as well.
a lot of it is to do with regulation of social media. So I think, again, going back to the free speech thing, I think not that we shouldn't value free speech, of course we should, and privacy. But I just don't think we should be distracted when this is not this is not a free speech argument. It's a business model argument, and we should be talking about business models. And yes, we should also be talking about free speech, but downstream of the business model.
Do you feel that with the release of the film and with Molly's dad, I don't remember if he runs the Molly Rose Foundation or if there's a different head of the organization.
There's a CEO I can't remember actually if he's the CEO, but yes, there is someone who runs it on a day-to-day basis. And they are against the ban, the Molly Rose Foundation.
Do you feel that, I'll give the example of Parliament as opposed to wider Europe, do you feel like politicians are becoming more aware of the nuances of this conversation now, or no?
I think again, I mean, this is all just in my experience of the film, but
just from what you've seen.
So what I feel like I've witnessed is there was, like, clearly there's some problems that most parents and teachers and even teenagers are highly aware of, right? They're experiencing it multiple times a day for many years, and that's individual and collective, because if another, everyone's basically talking about it. Then, so that's here.
Yeah.
Then very, very little is done about it by anyone in government for way too long. So now you've got this massive vacuum. And then organizations like, for example, like Smartphone Free Childhood, who are a sort of grassroots, parent-driven, let's do something about this problem.
Sure.
They step in and fill this vacuum because they're actually, like, putting forward. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what they're putting forward. My point is that because governments didn't do anything for so long, and because hundreds of thousands and millions of people are experiencing some negative stuff, then it's civil society that have stepped in to say, we want something done. We demand that something's going to be done. I think from what I've heard, in the next week, we are meant to be hearing from the government about what they're going to do. And we were, again, like crazy fortunate that when the film came out in the UK, the government began this public consultation about what people think we should be doing about social media. And the response to that consultation, I think, is meant to be next week. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Exciting, I think. It's good that the conversation's being had, finally. Feels like it's years too late, and sadly, too many kids and people have harmed themselves up to this point. I think like many things, it needed to get to such a terrible point before the government finally did something about it, because that's all that, not that it did have to, but like many other things, that's what seems to happen.
But I don't actually think for me, it's, I mean, obviously, as beyond words what Molly's family have been through and many other families have been through. But the vast majority of people have not experienced that, and they still want something done about social media, because it's not just about child safety and kids taking their own lives. It's about how we want to live and who we want driving our experience through life. And one of the things that always comes up in Q&As is this idea of like, at what point did we consent to co-parenting our kids with the algorithm? When was that allowed? And how was that allowed? And again, if coming back to the free speech thing, what kind of free speech are your kids having if they are being if everything they do digitally is being
manipulated,
recorded, and then depending on how a machine analyzes those recordings, shifts their behavior? Like, is that the free speech that people are defending? Like, obviously not. So again, it's like, if you really want to talk about free speech, I think maybe we need to I've only just thought of this, but maybe we need to just update the language of free speech. We're not talking about what you can and can't say. We're talking about who has the power to manipulate your view of the world.
There was that really, I never thought of it before, and it was a perfect analogy by Molly's dad in the film, when he said, you, as a parent, you lock your doors at night, you make sure your daughter's safe in her room, and as far as humans have ever existed for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, that's essentially been the same. But they're no longer just alone. They're really in the outside world in their room, and they're exposed to whatever the algorithm wants to regurgitate onto them.
Yeah, so that's very poignant, and that is why we created this version of Molly's room. As we were looking for ages for like, what is a universally understood space that goes beyond demographics or nationality or whatever. And it was like the bedroom, right? Because as you said, like, forever bedrooms have been places of security and safety and privacy, and now they're not. And if when we grew up, I presume our parents wouldn't have been keen on a guy sitting in our room at night taking notes on our behavior and then manipulating our behavior the next morning. Like, obviously that would never happen. And that's what we're now doing. Like, that's what and it's not just our bedrooms, it's our cars and our fridges and our hoovers and our schools and everything.
Yeah, there was that, I don't know if you heard, there was that TV show on Apple TV, Pluribus, that came out.
Yeah.
And there was did you hear this about the fridge? No, so there was, I can't remember what the name of the main character was. I think
I can't remember. I like that
Carol.
Yeah.
And it said like, we're watching you, Carol, or something.
Yeah.
And someone had a Sony smart fridge that advertised this, and it turned out that this person was either bipolar or schizophrenic, and so they put in big letters, we're watching you, Carol, or we're here when you want to talk, Carol, or something like that. And this person had an episode because of just ever-present technology, spying on them, using them for, obviously different malicious purposes, but it ended up being horrible for a whole different reason.
And this is what I don't understand about I'm obviously, I completely support free speech, but I just mean, I don't understand how all these people who defend free speech really vehemently don't see the paradox of how much they're driven by the algorithm, and that they should be fighting targeted algorithms more than they should be fighting whatever they're currently fighting.
It's just two sides of polarized camps. It's just the same conversation in a different way. If more people who are concerned about free speech, which is important, were talking to people like the Molly Rose Foundation, you could maybe meet somewhere in the middle, because it doesn't seem like the government is doing this. So maybe more conversations between people would progress that conversation in a helpful way. But I haven't seen that. I really haven't seen that anywhere.
No.
Okay. Right. Well, this has been a very enlightening discussion, and I really like the fact that you come at it from a slightly different perspective than I do, because I don't think what you're talking about is any less important. I've been seeing a lot of stuff on the other side of the conversation, but it's conversations like these that need to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that yeah, just like you would have deconstructed, mainstream media in your time,
Sure.
I'm sure, and understood its biases and its accepting who funds it and all the rest of it. Again, paradox. I completely understand and support free speech, but simultaneously, you have to be questioning, what does free speech mean in the age of the algorithm, and in whose interest is it that this warped version of free speech that we've been discussing, there is a reason that Zuckerberg and Musk and the rest of them have designed systems that they profit from that are about the free flow of information, whether or not it's truthful or harmful or divisive or polarizing. That who benefits from that most?
Yeah, it's whose version of free speech are we going to get is a good way of putting that.
But even what type of free speech are they building? They are only. It's not free speech that they're building. I'm saying free speech. It has to be protected. But what they're building is not free speech.
Whose speech, really?
What they're saying is, what you and I call free speech is not what they're selling you.
Yeah.
What they want is free access to every individual, so their algorithm can learn from you. They want their algorithms to have the freedom, but they're selling that to a lot of people as free speech, and that is an illusion, and it is working. And not enough of us understand how to communicate. It's really complicated to communicate. It's really complicated to learn about. Certainly not being educated about. And it's super nuanced. And in America particularly, where free speech is, culturally a touchstone kind of thing, you only have to say that you are protecting free speech, and then everyone's going to agree with you. But I think if I was them, I would have spent hundreds of millions of dollars with PR companies and lobbyists and all the rest of it. Again, if we're talking about veneers of the like button and the chat bar, the version of free speech they're selling is a veneer. It's not true. They just want freedom for the algorithms to access you and manipulate for power and profit, which is the very thing that free speech advocates are against.
Yeah, it's important to note as well, they're not trying to necessarily sell you one type. They're just trying to sell you kind of whichever type you want.
They don't care.
Yeah.
It's agnostic. And they don't care if you're... There's a scene in the film where it's like... I think there's a text card of borders and immigration and Palestine and gender and the machine itself narrates we don't care. If you're right wing, we'll feed you more critical stuff about the left, and if you're left wing, we'll feed you more we are agnostic. We just want access to you, and we just want to be able to exploit that access. That's what sits underneath the veneer of the free speech argument. But it needs to be really clear that when you or I are talking about free speech, that is not the same thing that they're talking about.
Yeah,
I think it's the equivalent of greenwashing.
Yeah. I see what you mean as well. Greenwashing and AI, because I always talk about that. My partner's ChatGPT is very different from my ChatGPT. They're not the same people, but it's because it's biasing its own algorithm in favor of slightly different than social media companies. It's not necessarily what we like, because we don't go on ChatGPT and like things, but we speak to it in a certain way and it learns based on that and then personalizes itself for us. And now,
Right. And do you consider that free speech?
n-
That response you're getting
no.
back?
not necessarily. No, it seems like a curated form of speech. And now they're, I think as recently as a couple of days ago, they're starting to push ads on these as well, because they're trying to get people to pay for it. So there you go. There you get the funding model, and they're going to, based on your previous conversations, try to promote things to you.
Which is no different, as I said, to the like button. It's just an updated
It's a different form.
version.
It's the modern form.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's not to say that it's not that we are in an argument. What I think's important is that we all have this like, fuck, I've been hoodwinked. Like, if that, I'm not saying like my opinion is valid at all, but let's just say if that is the case, we should all be talking about, oh my God, what do we do about that? Because that really is like a different way of perceiving the attack on our reality. Like, it's a very, very real and significant and happening right now.
Yeah.
Huge problem. And to your point about you and your girlfriend's different chat experiences, that difference over many years of you interacting with whatever it is you're using, ChatGPT or whatever, the more knowledge it accumulates on you and your girlfriend, micro knowledge in the way that you ask questions, in the way how you respond, what adverts you, blah, blah, blah. If it's got cookies that are going all over the internet and still feeding it like Facebook does, etc., 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 your worlds are just going to gradually get wider and wider and wider in the way that ChatGPT is talking to you, or any of these systems are talking to you. And again, that goes all the way back to, what we were talking about earlier about that's the threat.
Yeah.
Because if you're not having shared realities, how do you have cohesive societies?
Well, I hope that as you go around and show this film, that these are the types of conversations you're having with people, because it's people like yourself. Like I said, I've not seen a brilliant film about social media and the dangers of it since The Social Dilemma, which was quite a few years ago. And I don't even know if they actually went around and had Q&As and conversations around it. I can't imagine they did, because it was just a Netflix film that loads of people would have seen. But I'd hope with you traveling around the world and downing 14 coffees a day.
It's going to take more than just me.
Yeah. But I hope at least it's a nudge in the right direction.
It's a nudge. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, your film was brilliant. People can check it out on Channel 4, Molly versus the Machines. Thank you. This has been a really nice conversation.
Same, man. Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.